Hi guys, I recently finished a playthrough of Metro Last Light and thought I would give you my impressions of the game as a whole. And the summary in advance, the summary is I thought it was amazing. A worthy successor to Metro 2033 and a great game in its own right. If you enjoy post-apocalyptic games, it's probably a must-have for you. You should get this game and you should play it. Well worth it. Time well spent. It's not a long game. It's probably in the region of between 15 to 20 hours, but it's 15 to 20 very intense hours. And that's if you only play through once. If you can play through a number of times if you want to experience it in different ways, but just, even playing through once, well worth it. Graphically, the game delivers. The world looks amazing, sometimes even beautiful. I mean, when you go out on the surface, it can be quite breathtaking. But it's more than just whether it looks nice. It looks real. Perhaps it's the physics. There's just something about the way everything reacts and everything looks. It just looks real. You get completely immersed in the game. You don't think of it as a game. You really do. Go in there feeling this world, and the sound really helps that. The sound is very, very well done in this game. But this game is about the story. I mean, that's what this game relies on when it comes down to it. Forget the graphics, forget the sound. It's about the story, and the story is incredible. It's a really engaging story. The characters you meet in the game really sort of drag you in, and I mean, that just alone for the story, even if everything else was terrible, even if it had bad graphics, I'd recommend it just for the story. Now, I'm going to leave it there with the story. I'm going to continue talking about the story a little later in this video, but that's going to contain spoilers, and there are going to be people who don't want to hear that part and will want to, stop the video then. So I'm going to leave the discussion of the story until the end of this video. And before I do that, I'm going to just discuss a few of the problems I had with the game, a few of what I would consider bad points before I move on, just so you know exactly what you're getting into. Now, I played the game on Ranger Hardcore mode straight from the start, and I mean, I highly recommend it. It's a great way to play. It does make the game feel a lot more difficult. Well, it makes the game a lot more difficult, and it makes it more immersive because it removes things like the annoying heads-up display and that type of thing that a lot of these games come with. And of course, I did the same for Metro 2033, so inevitably I'm going to be comparing Metro Last Light with Metro 2033 as well as considering it as its own game. The problem number one, first problem I had was I felt it was a little too easy. I've got to be honest with you, the stealth seemed a little too easy in Metro Last Light. It wasn't the easiest stealth game I've ever played, but compare it to Metro 2033 and it was pretty easy. You could sneak around, and if you made a mistake and stepped into the light, you had a couple of seconds to duck back out, and you had this little warning, this sort of sound that would warn you. You could then run away, and you'd hear the guy say, "Did I see something?" and he'd start walking after you, but you somehow managed to get away very easily. And this was not the case in Metro 2033. If you stepped out into the light and somebody saw a human crawling in the middle of a light, they raised the alarm, and once the alarm was raised, you couldn't just evade them. I mean, in Metro Last Light, you could evade the enemies very easily. The few times I got discovered, I managed to sort of lose them very easily indeed, which was weird because I could clearly see them all moving around. Metro 2033 was sort of the opposite. Everything was so damned dark, I could barely pick the enemy out, but they would find me a lot easier. And a lot of that came down to the fact that there was often more of them. So they would spread out and start pinning you down, and you had to move. But it gave it a very intense and quite realistic feeling. I mean, if you got discovered in Metro 2033, you couldn't just duck into a room, crouch in a corner, and all the guys were, "Oh, where has he gone?" No, in Metro 2033, they saw you duck into that room, and they're just sat outside waiting for you to come out again. They're not stupid. And they just sit there with their guns trained at the door and you're in trouble. The only way to lose them was to really get some distance. You had to sort of go down a couple of corridors, turn a few corners, and then, then they might lose you. I lost them a couple of times in Metro 2033, but it wasn't easy. There was also other things like broken glass in Metro 2033. You'd be creeping along in the dark and suddenly you just hear and you think, oh crap. And you knew it was up. The game was over. I mean, you had to just start running and fighting, and you couldn't even fight that much because, if there were 3 people with AKs pointed at you, you weren't going to go into a battle with them because all it took was one shot and you died. You get shot in the head with an AK and you're dead. Bye-bye. There was none of this, oh, there are 3 guys waiting out there. I'll nip out headshot one, nip out headshot the other. You nipped out and they headshotted you. If you got pinned down in somewhere like that, you had to sort of wait a second and then maybe throw a grenade out or just run out of the door to another room on the other side and just keep doing that. You had to use cover and movement and then try to lose them or get yourself in a position where they had to move on you, and when they popped out, you shot them. It was really realistic, it was really intense, and the battles terrified me. I didn't get that in Metro Last Light. I found it a lot easier to just stealth my way everywhere, and when I did get discovered, it seemed a lot easier to kill them than they were killing me. This was not true of mutants. Mutants was still viciously hard. It was the human opponents. They didn't worry me particularly. And you could argue that Artyom was a tougher ranger at this point, but honestly I think it lost a little bit of its intensity because of that. Point 2 that I didn't like about Metro Last Light was boss fights. Not a big lover of boss fights, especially when done in what I consider an arcade kind of way. And what I mean by that is the typical format. You close a door, it closes behind you, or you step off a ledge and there's no way back up, and you're suddenly in a conveniently arena-shaped area where you can't get out of, and you could almost imagine spectators lining the side. The type of room. And the boss you've got to kill is a special boss, and you can only damage him when he's during a certain moment, when he holds his arms out in such and such a way and you stand on one leg and wear different coloured socks or something. I mean, something really sort of weird. It's not like in boss fights like in Skyrim where, the dragon comes and you just got to keep fighting him. It takes forever to fight him because he's tough. You've got to do some thing, you have to wait till he's stunned, then shoot him, or hit him in the back, or there's these things. I always find those type of fights, it's not even that they're difficult or annoying, because in actual fact, in the boss fights, I generally didn't have that much problem killing them in the end. I believe there was only one boss fight where I actually had any amount of trouble, but they never feel immersive to me. They always feel a little arcade. I almost imagine myself with a controller in my hand spamming buttons and trying to do power-ups and things. I didn't like it in Metro Last Light. I don't remember Metro 2033 having these type of things, and I didn't want it in Metro Last Light. And if there are any future games in the Metro series, and I do hope there are, I'd rather not see that. I don't see the point of it. I don't mind the waves. I don't mind the, where you activate something and then you get 300 mutants coming at you in waves. That felt okay. It was challenging. It was often more challenging than the boss fights. But it stayed... I stayed in the game. I stayed immersed in the game rather than thinking about game mechanics. I wasn't thinking about, power-ups and things like that. I'm not a lover of boss fights, especially when done that way. There you go. And the third thing that I did not like was the way they handled Ranger Hardcore, specifically the UI mode. They warn you in advance and say, we will disable the UI, but that warning is irrelevant in my mind, because they don't warn you, oh, by the way, integral game mechanics will almost be broken by removing this. And they are. I'm sorry, but the selection of grenades and knives is fundamentally flawed in Ranger Hardcore. For those of you who've not played the game, you have to press a key and then you move your mouse or direction keys in certain directions, and it selects one of the items. And the idea was it was supposed to have some type of wheel, I assume. I mean, I've not seen it, but I assume there was some sort of UI wheel and you could see where your mouse was, or you see where the highlight was, or something like that. You don't get that in Ranger Hardcore mode. You get no UI whatsoever. What happens is you press the button, your character stands stock still, you move your mouse around, and you hope like hell that you've selected something. Now, there is a sound if you get it right. Although there were plenty of times when I'm stood there desperately trying to get it, and I just couldn't get it at all. I couldn't get the sound. But the most annoying thing is the moments when you really need it the most are when you're in battle. And there's so much sound going on, you can barely hear what's going on. You can't hear the difference between a dagger and a grenade sound. The sound is very faint, and you can't hear it in the middle of battle. And the idea behind Ranger Hardcore mode is immersion. It's not just about it being hard, it's immersion. Let me tell you what's not immersive. Stood in the middle of a boss fight, completely still, pressing this button, moving your mouse wildly, trying to select grenades, thinking, have I got a grenade? Is this a grenade? Okay. No, that's a knife. Or, okay, I'm going to throw a knife at this creature now. I think I've got a knife. And then you go to throw your knife, and instead you plant a claymore mine. There's nothing immersive about that. It is not immersive. It's just frustrating. And what it does is it makes you concentrate on a game mechanic. And any time you focus on a game mechanic, you are not immersed. That is a failure of design of pretty epic proportions, to be honest with you. And I mean, the same could be said for the fact that there's no way to check your ammo, your filters, or your medkits. Your character has no way of knowing if he's got 10 bullets for this weapon or 200. None. Which is unrealistic. There's no way for your character to know, does he have any grenades left? There's no way for you to know if your character has filters left, and so on. You can't look at your pockets and check. And the thing that's frustrating about that is it's so unnecessary, because Metro 2033 handled it perfectly. You could look at your watch in Metro 2033 and it would show you how much ammo you had very, very easily. And it was perfectly immersive. So yeah, there was a tiny bit of UI on that section. So in 2033, Ranger Hardcore mode disabled the heads-up display, it disabled hints and that type of thing, but it let you check your ammo. And more importantly, when you selected things like knives, you knew you had a knife selected. Why? Because you pressed a key. One key for knives, one key for grenades. You pressed the key once, a knife came out, and you could see the knife in your hand. You pressed it again, you switched to throwing knife, and you could see the throwing knife in your hand. Same with the grenades. You selected grenade with a different key. You could see the grenade in your hand. You pressed the grenade key again, you changed grenade. You could see it. You didn't need a user interface. You didn't need a heads-up display. You could clearly see what was in your hand. It was easy. There was a separate key for it. I have no idea why they decided to change this and use a mouse wheel. The only thing I can think is they were trying to reduce the number of keys, and I don't know why. Trying to reduce the number of keys. Does that make it easier to make for consoles or something? I don't know, but that was a terrible, terrible idea. And removing the UI completely on that, which is an essential game mechanic. I mean, you need to be able to know if you're throwing a grenade. It's as simple as that. It was just daft. And as I said, the fact that Metro 2033 did it so well means that this was a step backwards. Now, the argument people are going to make is, well, you were warned. No, you weren't. You were not warned. It did not warn you that certain game mechanics would be almost broken. I mean, almost, so difficult to use as to be almost broken when you select that play mode. And even if they had, that would have been stupid. You can't have a gameplay mode where certain essential game mechanics are almost unusable. in that mode. You can't. You just can't do it. That's stupid, and warning people is not acceptable. It is not acceptable to make a game. And, you know, I mean, if I said to you, right, here's Ranger Super Hardcore mode, warning, the game is really, really difficult. But then once you got in, what had actually happened is I disabled the left key. So you can only turn right from now on. I mean, that's going to be a lot more difficult, isn't it? Well, you were warned it was going to be harder. No, that's stupid. Stop doing it. And this mechanic for changing between grenades and knives was stupid. Without a user interface, it simply didn't work well at all. If you were in battle and couldn't hear the sound, it was very, very difficult. And oft times, even if it was quiet, you'd be trying it, you'd be moving, and you'd be thinking, it's still not selecting. Have I not got any grenades? Is that what it is? Do I not have grenades? I thought I picked a grenade up. How can your character not know if he's got a grenade? Is it? I'm trying to pull a grenade, but I'm failing. Okay. Do I not have any? Check your damn pockets. Really, really frustrating. Really annoying. And for the next game, for God's sake, I hope they go back to the Metro 2033. Okay. So those are the things I didn't like about the game. And yet I'm still recommending it. Well, yeah, because it's actually a brilliant game. Even with the fact that it was a little easier, it's still a great game. I can sort of put up with the boss fights. That game mechanic was truly aggravating, but in actual fact, you can sort of play the game without needing that many grenades and knives if you want. The throw-in knives are not as essential, in my opinion, in Metro Last Light as they were in 2033. The silent takedowns from behind were quite easy in Last Light, and so it's a preferable way of doing it. So you don't have to risk missing with a knife as often. So it doesn't affect you as much as it might have had that mechanic been in 2033, to be honest. And as I said, I mean, I know some people are going to be horribly offended that I found some things wrong with their favourite ever game. It's still one of my favourite games now. I still think this game is absolutely brilliant. I still think it's superb. I just think those three differences, and that let's be honest here, what I just described were differences between Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light. And the reason I'm so annoyed about them is they do seem a step in the wrong direction. It's not as if you can even argue, well, there's no better way of doing that mechanic for grenades and knives. Yes, there is. Metro 2033 did it perfectly. So, yeah. Now, I did say I was going to talk about the story more, because the game is literally about the story. It really is. And I have to say, the story is phenomenal. It's just... at first I thought it wasn't going to be as good as 2033. I liked the 2033 story progression. But Metro Last Light's story began to grow on me as I realised what the game was doing. And from now on, there are going to be spoilers, so stop listening if you haven't played the game or you haven't watched the Let's Play and you don't want to hear this. There's spoilers. Okay? So here goes. This game is a game about redemption. Your character, let's face it, is a genocidal murderer. I'm not saying he's a horrible, evil person, but he did commit an act of genocide. He wiped out an entire species. And this game, Metro Last Light, is constantly slapping you in the face with it. And I don't mean in very abrupt ways, as it does. There is plenty of times it just says, oh, and you wiped them out. But what it does is it undermines all of your excuses. So, for example, the typical excuses you'll say to yourself was, well, I thought they were hostile. If it's hostile, kill it. You remember that's what Hunter would say. If it's hostile, kill it. And all the way through Metro Last Light, you're facing that type of excuse thrown right back at you, because one of the main bad guys, the Reds, well, that's his excuse for trying to wipe out the Rangers of D6. He sees them as hostile, he sees them as a threat, and therefore they should be wiped out. You could be using the I'm just following orders argument. But then, of course, there's the whole Pavel thing. Pavel, who I still, even after he betrayed me, liked, still felt he was my friend, still felt that he didn't want to do that to me, that he genuinely would rather have not. But he had to follow orders, didn't he? He was just following orders. And the game keeps slapping you with this. It keeps hitting you with all the excuses that you probably use to justify wiping out the Dark Ones. And without realizing it, the game makes you feel like you're being judged. Not on what you did. Not on what you did, because you're trying to get forgiveness for that. You're trying to save the Dark One now. The last of the Dark Ones that you wiped out, you're trying to save him. But you get the feeling that the Dark One isn't judging you on that. He's not judging you on whether you're trying to do the right thing now. He's judging you to see if you are able to forgive people who commit transgressions against you. You know, so it's like you're trying to get him to forgive you. You want his forgiveness at some level. You want redemption. Are you willing to give it to other people? I mean, the people that you, all the way through the game, you have this horrible urge to kill certain people. Really, Lesnitsky, the main bad guy. There are so many of them that you really just, oh God, I want to kill you. I want to kill you. I really want to kill you so badly. And then when you get the chance, do you forgive them? Are you willing to forgive them the transgressions that they did against you? Because when it comes down to it, the transgression that you did against the Dark Ones was so much worse. So much worse. Absolute genocide against a people who were trying to make peace, who were trying to help humanity. Your crime is so much greater than all of the people you meet in Metro Last Light. And if you can't forgive them their crimes, why should the Dark Ones forgive you? And I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. And here's the thing. I didn't get what they call the good ending. So I wasn't good enough during the game to get what people have called the good ending. But I'm sort of glad I didn't. I tried to do my best. I think I tried to be as understanding as possible. I think I showed compassion as much as could be expected, perhaps more. Perhaps I made a few mistakes due to confusion. I didn't save the bear mother creature from the dog because I didn't realize it was a different creature killing her. And you know, so I made some mistakes, but generally I felt like I was doing the right thing. And the ending still felt good to me, even though apparently it wasn't the good ending. I mean, humanity had still proven itself violent and warlike once again, but I think we'd also shown that capacity for forgiveness. The fact that there were some of us who were willing to learn, willing to go beyond our basic natures. And I think the Dark One's child, in the end, understood that. And that even though we were a horribly flawed species, there was hope for us. And that one day, his kind would return and hopefully help us. And that we would be ready for them. We would have learned our lesson, and that the whole thing at D6 would serve as a poignant reminder that the real enemy is ourselves, that the Dark Ones were never a threat, that the threat were the Reds and the Nazis and the Rangers. We were the threat. We were the threat to those other groups. We like to think of ourselves as noble and above it all, but they saw us as a threat the way we see them as a threat. And that is the real enemy. And I think the ending just, it was sad. It had that little edge of depressing, but there was an undercurrent of hope, of perhaps things will change. But I suppose I'm going to have to wait for the next game to find out. So let's hope there is another game. Because frankly, I don't want this to end. I think both of these games are absolutely just... they're up there with some of the best games I've played. And it is because of the story. It is because of the tale it weaves. Because it's so... well, because it's so believable. Depressing, but maybe just a little bit hopeful as well. Anyway, I have rambled long enough, and there you have it. There are my opinions on Metro Last Light. Absolutely superb game. If you've not played it, get it and play it. I cannot recommend it enough. As I've said, it is well worth it. Even with the tiny flaws that frustrated me, that is nothing compared to all of its strengths and that amazing story. They literally wipe away all those little negative things completely. So, highly recommend. Loved the game myself. And that really is all I have to say.